is Governor Asa Hutchinson, and you're listening to The Morning Rush.
Welcome back into The Morning Rush. Going to the phone lines, welcoming in Governor Asa Hutchinson. First time Morning Rush appearance. Governor, I know you're strapped for time pretty much at all hours of the day, so we really appreciate you making some time for us here on The Morning Rush.
Oh, glad to be with you. Always look forward to having a conversation about what's happening as well as sports.
You know, Governor, a lot of people may or may not know, I think if they live in Northwest Arkansas, and particularly Benton County, they have a good idea that this is a governor that likes his sports and likes watching his grandkids play sports, because if you've been to a Bentonville basketball game in the last few years, they're likely to have seen the governor at a sporting event. Tell our listeners, because you're a governor that gets out and watches some games because you got grandkids that play in sports.
Oh, absolutely. I love our high school sports, always have, but it's pretty special when you've got some grandkids that play. Of course, Asa the Fourth is played at Bentonville. He got to play with Malik Monk there for a few years, and now Asa is playing at Drury University. He's a junior, and he's got a full ride scholarship, so basketball's treated him well and still enjoying the sport. And then his younger brother, Abel, is going to be playing at Bentonville. He'll be a junior this year and playing some good ball out there. So I want sports to be back. I'm motivated to make sure we can have that, but we got to do it safely next year.
You know, everybody's watching these updates every day and looking at the numbers. What are the key indicators that you look at? You go through the numbers every day, and everybody's trying to figure out what is the key data component to watch as we try to figure out whether or not we can have football back this fall. What are the numbers we need to be watching as we move forward and trying to make decisions on what we can do and can't do this fall?
I think there's two important parts of it. First of all, we probably put too much attention just on them going to go up, every day, and the measure of the cases sometimes reflects how much you're testing out there. And so that we put a lot of attention to, and we're going to continue to, but I pay more attention to our hospitalizations. And from day one, we've talked about making sure that we flatten the curve, we spread this out so that we don't overwhelm our hospital system, and that they have the capacity to handle their regular caseload as well as their COVID patients. And so that's a key indicator to me. And as I indicated yesterday, I talked to a lot of hospital administrators, and we're in a good position now, even though it gets tight, just because, you're going to have a lot of non-COVID patients that are using hospital space. The other thing in relation to sports is what's the level of community spread? I mean, if you've got fewer than 20 cases in the county, then, the risks are very minimal, and you feel very comfortable with starting school, playing sports. But if you have a higher level of community spread, then the risk increase, obviously. And even though the children are not as susceptible, they don't have the same risk as somebody who's 65 or older, they still can add to the spread of the virus if you're not careful. So I'm looking at both of those indications, our hospital capacity as well as the extent of community spread as we make decisions.
We're speaking with Governor Asa Hutchinson here on The Morning Rush. Governor, obviously, as a sports talk radio show, we connect how this impacts sports on a daily basis. Just from your perspective and your talkings with Hunter Yurchek or other athletic directors in the state, do you think people truly realize how much sports affects the economy, not only in Arkansas, but in the South and other areas of the United States?
No, I don't think people dwell upon that. I think they know theoretically that sports is a real economic driver. But, for example, the sports activities at the University of Arkansas actually contribute to and help support our academic side. And so it's really a big revenue generator for the university system. But it's also just part of our culture. I mean, you think about hotels. that if you don't have Razorback games, if you don't have local sports, I mean, the teams aren't coming in, they're not using hotel space. So it is an economic driver really at every level, whether it's high school or whether it's the summer tournaments that we've been missing. We've here in Little Rock, you had big deal, the big basketball tournament here.
Real Deal on the Rock. Mm-hmm.
Real Deal on the Rock. We weren't able to have that. That was a big economic driver here in Central Arkansas. But you can multiply that around the state. So it is, not only do we miss it, but, that is a factor in our economy. And whenever you're looking at a state like Arkansas that enjoys our sports, but also we like to host those, it makes a difference to us.
Governor, what is the data or the medical experts that you're listening to and leaning on? What does it say about people under the age of 25 and that age group? How are they reacting? What's the data showing you that how is COVID reacting with that age group?
Well, they're reacting as a typical young person that they believe they're invincible, that they're not worried about the virus that much. Now, some of them have been taught well and they're trained and they have an understanding that even though it's not going to be a high risk for them, they still can spread that to their loved ones. And so there's a growing understanding in that age group as to their own responsibility and the risk associated with them just running around. But that's been one of the problems. I mean, whether you talk about over the 4th of July or Memorial Weekend, when you're looking at that age group under 25 out there at the lake or in a house party somewhere, that they're clearly not socially distancing, they're not wearing a mask, and they're just having a great time. Well, in this environment, that is irresponsible behavior because that's what leads to the spread of that virus. And even though it might not impact them, it just might pass through them. They could give that to their grandmother. They could give it to somebody else in their community that is impacted by it. And so, education is a critical part of that. And we see in that 25 and under, the increase in their cases is growing faster than actually the 65 and plus because the 65 and older are being very, very careful. They know how risky it is for them.
How severe are the cases? I guess I didn't ask. How severe are the cases in those ages 25 and under? I guess what I was trying to drive at or trying to determine as you look at the data as we're trying to get back to football and college football and high school football is determining the risk and the severity of the cases. And is that even a factor as you're looking at it and as the decision makers are looking at it is those in that age group? How are they doing in that age group when they are contracting COVID?
Well, the repercussions, it's a very mild reaction to the virus at that age group. And so many of them, some of them might have the virus and are asymptomatic, which means they don't even show any symptoms. Others might have, a headache for a while. They might have a temperature for a while, but it just passes through them and they go about their business. But even though they are asymptomatic, they can still pass along that virus to others. So, and that is a factor as you look at the risk, and it is a low risk for young people whenever they go back to school or they play sports. It's a low risk to them. But you also have to factor in there is some risk, and then secondly, how that impacts the larger community. And obviously, it could be coaches that they're around. It could be the officials that are there, or it could be the teachers if you're in a school environment. And so kids are the highest priority, of course, but in a school environment, you also have to worry about all the people that they're around. And so that's why these are big decisions that we're making. But let me just say something back on sports. We've got to be innovative. I mean, right now we're allowing, baseball, the non-contact sports that can go ahead and they're playing right now. but it's the contact sports that are a greater challenge for us. And I did talk to Hunter Yurachek, and, the broader SEC, they're trying to figure this out, but they're not subject to the usual rules of the state health department. And so higher education is exempt from it, and they're going to make their decision in terms of the health of their student athletes and those that are impacted by it. But I'm hoping that they can be innovative, figure out the right time frame that they can engage in it.
We're speaking with Governor Asa Hutchinson here on the Morning Rush, and Tommy and you guys were talking about 25 years and younger. Asa, I'm 25 years old. I kind of reside in that bonehead millennial category, and it's hard sometimes for, I think, when you have an older, whether it's like sometimes I tune out what Tommy says, sometimes I tune out with an old, and I'm just being honest, I'm just being frank. So how do you resonate with some of these younger kids? How do you resonate with teenagers? How do you resonate with college kids? Are you talking with, I don't know if like younger popular Arkansas kids, but like how do you get through to these millennials that aren't abiding by the different things, whether it's from the CDC or whatever, that have shown that it could increase if you don't follow these procedures and rules?
We're trying to utilize their role models or people in our advertising that set a good example for them. And so we're using contemporary figures, we're using sports figures, and bringing them into the mix and helping on the communication. I realize that you don't sit back and watch my 1:30 briefing every day, and neither do most of the 25 and under.
I did yesterday, though. I will say I did yesterday. So
you have to reach them through what they're listening to, and we're looking at online messages. We're looking at sports figures and coaches as they communicate that message, and I do think they do listen. Yeah. And I talk about my grandsons, and they understand the risk. They've been educated on it, so we just got to continue to help them understand it. And one of them is, do you have the kids wear a mask at school? I mean, what's the reaction to that? And children are resilient. They understand these things. Now, it's hard to get them in the habit of doing that, but, they learn, and I think that they can be successful in that. I don't think it will have adverse consequences to them.
Governor, what has to happen for specifically high school sports and specifically high school football to return this fall?
Well, I mean, first of all, you got to have school. I mean, they're not going to have high school sports without school starting. And then the question is, if you start the sports and say it's football, you got two issues. One is the health of the players on the field, and we have to be able to have sufficient testing capacity that is a quick turnaround so that we know the players that are going out on the field are COVID-free. That would be an ideal scenario. That takes a lot of testing. And then secondly, you worry about those in the stands, and so they do have to comply with our state rules for venues that make sure there's social distancing, the wearing of masks. I think that's the easier part of it, particularly in high school sports, but it's the players on the field that are the greatest concern because, I don't know how parents and the public react whenever you have a football player that tests positive. Mm-hmm. What will people feel comfortable then pulling that one student out, isolating them, and going on about the game? But that's going to be the reality of what happens next year, is that we're going to have positive tests, and we have to deal with it just like we do in the work setting, in our family setting. Life doesn't stop. You deal with it and continue on. Now, the bigger measurement is how big is the spread in the whole community, so that you can make good decisions. So it's not just one student athlete, but you could wind up having multiple, and that's obviously when you can't go on with the activity.
You've had your critics over the reasoning of you're not giving a statewide mask order. You've explained in your daily briefings at times why you have not done that. I want to give you the opportunity to do that again this morning as to why you haven't given a statewide order for people to wear masks.
Well, first of all, we're all trying to get to the same objective, which is we want people to wear masks. We want them, when they can't socially distance, to have a mask on. But, right now, I'm having a challenge just enforcing our mask rules within restaurants and bars and those type of venues, which is a requirement. I get complaints every day. Well, so-and-so went into a restaurant and they weren't wearing a mask, or the staff didn't have a mask. Well, we have to enforce that, and we have to get compliance. And we're trying to do that. Can you imagine what it would be like as to trying to enforce it in the general public? And what winds up, like in Texas, they have a mandate, but you give a warning the first time. And so it's really an education process that you're going through. And so our what we've approached it with here in Arkansas is we've given a model city ordinance so that we'd have the same type of requirements and mandates that a city can adopt. And I think Fort Smith is one of those that's debating that, but we've had 6 cities adopt that. And that way, if a city says, we've got a challenge with community spread, or we really want to make a difference here so we can have sports and activities, so we're going to clamp down and we're going to have a mandate for wearing the mask, then the cities have that option, and many of them are taking that. Now, that doesn't have a criminal penalty with it. It doesn't have a fine with it, but it does allow law enforcement to go into a business and to say, you're not wearing a mask, you've got to be removed from these premises. And so it does give some enforcement capability with law enforcement, but it all boils down, wherever you are, that if somebody doesn't want to wear a mask, it's going to be hard. You're not going to wind up arresting them. You're going to wind up educating them to do the right thing. Now, we have the capacity to do that. That's what we want to do, and I think it's starting to increase in Arkansas, and I hope the city activities and city ordinances will help on that.
Governor Hutchinson, we just spoke to the idea of some millennials not listening just because of tuning out and stuff. When you're talking on the subject of masks, and I thought you laid it out perfectly, how do you convince the people of Arkansas that it's not a political stunt, or it's not picking one side or the other, one party or the other? How do you convince Arkansans that it's just something we should all do together, regardless of which party you side with?
Yeah, I think that comes down to our personal experiences. Whenever somebody develops COVID and winds up going to the hospital that all of a sudden you realize, hey, this is not about politics. This could happen to anybody, and it's getting pretty close to us. And there's a growing number of people in Arkansas that have been impacted either personally or in a family or in a friend way about somebody going to the hospital because of COVID. Yesterday we had former Senator David Pryor, former governor, former senator. He went to the hospital testing positive for COVID. And so it's just a reminder that it could happen to anybody. And I think that's probably the best education experience. But it's also just listening to the science, and I hope people will do that and not to the politics of it.
Are you hearing anything from Washington or higher up from the White House, wherever, about the timing of a vaccine? Or what have you heard as a governor about possible timeline on that? Well,
we're actually fortunate that we all know Dr. Nate Smith, who's our Secretary of Health, who is with me at the 1:30 briefing every day. He's going to be leaving. He's been recruited because he's a national star to the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, so he'll continue to be a friend and somebody engaged in this fight. But we have someone coming on as the interim Secretary of Health. It'll be Dr. Jose Romero. Dr. Romero, right here in Arkansas, is on the national committee that's reviewing vaccines and their development for the United States. And so we do have a lot of engagement in that, and we're really optimistic. It's moving quicker than we thought because of the huge national resources and commercial resources being put forward in that effort. And so, the word is today that we're developing very quickly better therapeutics, which means better treatment protocols for somebody who does have COVID, so it gives them a better chance of recovery. And then secondly, the vaccine, they're very optimistic about. So it is possible by the end of the year that we could have a vaccine.
Governor, you've been a U.S. attorney. You've served in Congress. You've worked in the DEA. You've been in Homeland Security. You're the governor of Arkansas now. Have these last 4 months been the biggest challenge of your public service career?
They have. And I've been in Homeland Security post 9/11, so that was a very, very tough environment. I've been in some tense situations as a federal prosecutor. And the challenge for this is, and it's not just me, but it's for everyone, is that the end is uncertain. The future is difficult to know exactly where this is going to wind up. And that's challenging for us when we've been in it for 4 or 5 months and you don't know when we're going to be able to. And particularly, it's challenging for me, but I also think about our medical doctors and our nurses that are dealing with this every day in the hospital. Those are the ones that are really, really on the front line, and that's who I think about and hope that we can bring an end to this because it's so difficult on them. But this has been challenging for me, of course. I just get out there and try to make the best judgments I can every day, listening to the medical professionals. And someone said, you have to make a lot of unpopular decisions. And my response was, every decision I make seems to be unpopular. So it is a little bit challenging. We'll get through it.
Governor, how many hours of sleep have you been getting the last couple weeks, last couple months? Been like 4?
Well, it's been a little bit on the short side, but I try to pace myself because it's a long haul, so I still get my exercise. We talked about basketball. I still play basketball, so even before COVID-19, I was out there playing full court basketball every Friday with a group of guys, and I love it, and so I miss that part of it too. But I'm ready to get back.
Governor Asa Hutchinson, kind enough to make some time for us here on the Morning Rush. Governor, we really appreciate it.
Great to be with you. Y'all have a good day.
All right, thank you, Governor.